Good morning, Oakland Center for Spiritual Living. I am grateful to be here with you today. I'm grateful to be sharing this sacred time and space together in spiritual community where we get to say thank you for this day through our music. We get to come together and celebrate pride and the love and the beauty and the joy that that represents. Together, we are powerful. And so I'd like to step into my talk by exploring a few questions. I've spoken from the pulpit before about my love of questions, and now is really no different in that respect. Have you ever found yourself on a path or maybe a trail that you've navigated before, but this time, for whatever reason, you just knew you'd fail in the attempt? Well, one morning earlier this past week, my husband Dave and I and our dog Jackson, he's an Australian Shepherd, so he needs his daily walks. Well, we went for a walk and we decided to do what we call the Pruitt Loop. It's a 3-mile loop that goes around the Pruitt Water Park. The morning air was cool and crisp. And just such a relief from the heat of the prior week. I was feeling grateful to get out of the house, feeling good and alive and capable, until Dave asked, should we go up Mount Dave to go home? It was a reasonable request, given that the rest of the loop that we would normally take would take us out onto city streets. And with the dog, we don't always like to go there. Mount Dave is a hill within the water park's property that has a dirt fire road cut into it. And it goes up as an angle of 20 to 35, 40 degrees in some places. It's steep and the dirt is loose. So Dave, in his days as a cross-country coach, used to take his team up that hill for training runs. That's how the hill got its name, Mount Dave. Anyway, my stomach clenched when I considered going up that hill. I'd done it before many times. So I thought, okay, I can do this. And as I progressed up the hill, Jackson would run back and loop us in and then charge back up the hill, just like a herding dog would do. And Dave, he was in his element. He was focusing on his breathing to keep himself grounded and charging up the hill. Okay, so here I found myself making steady progress, one small step at a time, until my mind balked. And the next thing I knew, I was looking at that next section saying, it's so steep. I'm probably going to fall flat on my face and then I'm going to tumble down the hill. I could feel this thought. I didn't want to lose momentum by stopping, so I just kept going, tentatively putting one foot in front of the other. And then I kind of woke up and I remembered that I know what to do here. And I started mentally replacing my fear thoughts with thoughts of triumph and success from my previous ascents. So I turned my awareness within and to the solid placement of my feet as I repeated to myself, grounded in spirit, I rise above. Grounded in spirit, I rise above. And next thing I knew, I had crested that hill and I could stop and catch my breath. I was grateful to have mindfully taken action. This month has been incredible with our speakers on the topic of mindfulness for mavericks. We've explored mindful intention, mindful speech, just breathing. And our Wednesday night speakers, if you have not had the opportunity to see all of these Sunday and Wednesday night talks, I encourage you to go to our YouTube to watch them. It is well worth your time. This week, we are exploring mindful action. What is mindful action? Does action have to be work? What work am I called to do? I've heard the phrase before, and I've said it myself. My work is my work. Well, our reading today from Martha Graham tells us that we are each a unique incarnation of the one life. She says there is a vitality, a life force, an energy, a quickening that is translated through you into action. And because there is only one of you in all of time, this expression is unique. There is a mindful action that each of us only can take. So what does science of mind teach us about mindful action? Well, as we explore my responses to these questions, I'd like to invite you to translate these questions and responses into responses of your own. I'll make references to several things that you can look up later. Let me share by beginning with my understanding, what I've developed through my studies as a minister and a practitioner. Life, it's a natural paradox, right? It seems like a duality of stillness and action, of presence and principle, of being and doing. It's not a duality. The divine presence or being is always one, whole, perfect, and complete. Stillness, silence. But don't be fooled by that stillness or that silence, because there is always divine activity going on within that stillness. They say still waters run deep. So within this stillness, the one, God, is self-aware, is self-contemplating. And it's the responsiveness of the divine principle, or what we call in religious science, the law, that creates all activity of life. We call it the principle of life. And these are not two separate things. It's presence and principle, being and doing. It's one. Picture for yourself the yin-yang symbol. It's one, whole. So Science of Mind teaches that there is one life principle. And in his book, 365 Days for Richer Living, Ernest writes, and I encourage you to reference this later, "The world in which I live is the mind of God made visible. The body I wear is intelligence clothing me with a vehicle of accomplishment. The works of my consciousness, my hands, my efforts are the outlets through which I release the one mind into form. I now accept the responsibility of knowing myself as the mind of God in action. Knowing all men, humans, as the means by which the one mind acts, I know true equality. I am no greater than anyone else, and no other soul is greater than I am. All races and all creeds express the one God, the one life and the one truth. God in me is the only reality, and all men, people, are my brothers, sisters, siblings, living with me in the kingdom of good. All life in all forms is God in action. God appears to me in all things, through all people. That's on page 176. Have you ever observed or maybe sailed a sailboat? Early in our marriage, Dave just had to buy a sailboat. We had it moored in Mission Bay, San Diego, and we wanted to take it out. Only neither of us really knew what we were doing. We knew we had sails and it would operate. We didn't have an engine, and that was okay. We had sails. Anyway, we pulled up the anchor, and our little watercraft was bobbing to and fro, being pushed by the winds towards the rocks. Okay, then it dawned on Dave that although he had raised the sails, he had not engaged the rudder. Without the rudder engaged in the water, the sailboat moved across the water, but according to whichever way the wind was blowing. Movement is action, but it's undirected action. With the rudder engaged, a sailboat may be purposely set to work against the wind to make headway towards its intended goal. So in preparing for this talk, I've purposely kept my heart and mind open to what Spirit is wanting to reveal through me. And the phrase that kept coming forward was, "Be still and know God." This isn't a new phrase. I've crafted jewelry with this affirmation. It's just that it comes to me with a slightly different emphasis on the second to last word, that word, know. Knowing is activity. Knowing is the point of action that, when engaged, produces intended, consistent results, like setting that sailboat rudder into the water. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on now. Doing my work to learn about racism and all that I have not been taught or personally experienced, I'm beginning to see that my experience of life really is a result of my privileged status as a white woman. My privileged experience, it's not a universal or even a global experience. Now, at the Centers for Spiritual Living convention last February, it was stated that people of color are in fact the global majority, and that white people are the minority. And yet, racism persists. It's not a question of numbers, majority or minority. In fact, I believe it's a question of entrenched, subconscious, false beliefs, supported by systemic structures that are meant to keep white people in positions of power. My white privilege is a power structure systematically supported within these United States. You don't have to take my word for it. If you like, I encourage you to watch the video, Race in America, a Holy Post YouTube. It is eye-opening and disturbing. We, all of humanity, we cannot address, shift, or change the inequities created and perpetuated based on race until we are willing to acknowledge the existence and the consequences of these inequities, the underlying systems that support them, and to do our work to purge from within ourselves, our societies, the political systems, civil laws, these hidden beliefs and structures. So as I sat with all of these ideas, I realized that the mirror of my life doesn't reflect back to me my whiteness, or maybe more properly stated, I have not really seen and fully acknowledged it. I live within the realm of what is considered normal. And historically in the United States, it was touted as right. This is not due to any conscious action or activity on my part per se. It has simply been by virtue of my race. Going forward, I know that false beliefs that I uncover within myself as I explore what it means to have white privilege, these are not divine truths. And I'm interested in divine truths. The false beliefs are simply thoughts that I have lived with knowingly and unknowingly. So what does science of mind teach us? What mindful action may I take? Well, science of mind teaches us that what thought has created, thought can undo. As I've referred to, I love reading the daily guides. I have several of them that I use. And the daily guide for June 19th, prophetic here, from Ernest Holmes's book, 365 Science of Mind, helps me to put this in perspective. And it reminds me of what we teach in our classes about hidden thoughts and habit patterns. Let me share part of it. The larger part of our mental life is submerged. The habitual patterns of thought, which are subjective, automatically determine our physical and mental reactions. And in this way, we are more or less hypnotized from the cradle to the grave. Inner impulsions of these subjective thought patterns are often stronger than the intellect. Anyone who's ever tried to stop the habit of smoking or eating too much or obsessing over worrying thoughts understands where Ernest is coming from. And he goes on to say that willpower seems to have little effect on these subjective habits. Ernest encourages us to resort to imagination, feeling a deep conviction of, and an abiding faith in something greater than our will and higher than our intellect. With this understanding, we can stop using our creative power of the universe to produce limitation in our life and instead begin to awaken to our vast possibilities. Centers for Spiritual Living has a mission of creating and imagining a world that works for everyone. This world is within our reach, especially now, when so much of what we have accepted as normal is actively being called into question. I am grateful for this pause of life as normal created by COVID-19. And I am grateful for the viral sharing of videos of police brutality and systemic racism in action. Don't get me wrong. My heart aches for all of the lives lost unnecessarily and the families broken. Yet this is the opportunity to stop, reassess, reimagine a new way of being that can be used for a greater good. It's an opportunity to step out of the flow of normal and really see what's been going on below the surface and in some cases right before our eyes. Wake up. We are encouraged to actively release that which does not serve our fellow humans, anyone, and stands in the way of a world that works for everyone. So what does this term, mindful action, mean? Take a drink. I've come to define this term for myself as self with a capital S, contemplation. Mindful action is self-contemplation. This is what is meant by the declaration, be still and know God. Another reference point, Science of Mind textbook, page 279. Ernest states in his chapter on mental equivalence, with a section that he entitles, If We Know, these words. If we know that the power with which we are dealing is principle and not personality, if we know and believe that the mind is the only actor, cause, effect, substance, intelligence, truth, and power, That's all there is. If we know and have a real embodiment of this, then we can demonstrate. He says if we lack, if we are poor, if we are without friends, without opportunity, we should erase from our consciousness any sense of lack. We erase thought from consciousness by pouring in an opposite thought. This is Science of Mind 101. This new thought meets the other and neutralizes it. We must maintain a consistent, positive, aggressive mental attitude in the truth. My work. I am a second-generation Polish American on my father's side. And I can trace my ancestors back to the group referred to as the Daughters of the American Revolution on my maternal grandmother's side. Most of my early childhood, 1st through 10th grade certainly, was spent in a small Polish Catholic village called Mattituck, New York, on Long Island. As you might imagine, my education as a child of white European immigrants played down the extent to which the states were established and thrived on the industry of slavery and the idea supporting slavery that Africans could be bought and sold as property. My ancestors, especially those who crossed over from Europe during the time of the American Revolution, were within the group who believed that they could eliminate from lands that they desired to possess anyone of non-white, non-European heritage. These are the facts of my heritage that I must reconcile. Today, considering Ernest's words, specifically, we erase from thought, from consciousness, by pouring in an opposite thought every time I make the statement and know that Black lives matter. I am maintaining consistent, positive, aggressive mental attitude in the truth. And according to divine principle of life, this must outpicture in my experience of life. Let that thought sink in. Science of Mind teaches us how to remove false thoughts, beliefs, ideas, and introduce the opposite, divine truth. We call this mindful activity argumentative or affirmative prayer. It's what we do daily when we say our prayers. What thought has created, thought can undo. Powerful. It means that I can, and sometimes do, as demonstrated in my earlier sharing about my ascent of Mount Dave, it means that I can make up in my head and experience consequences of all kinds, of calamities and injustices, and yet not one of these is permanent. or can be. The only permanent things are those of the divine. Oneness, love, peace, joy, abundance, prosperity, wholeness, order, life. Anything unlike these eternal verities, anything unlike life affirming, unlike life expanding aspects of the divine, these are transitory and can only persist if given power through my actively, consciously or subconsciously, thinking them into being. Let that thought sink in. Our false, limiting thoughts impressed upon the principle of life or the activity of the law that we refer to as the law, it always says yes, right? And it keeps these false ideas active and alive until we change it. My work is my work. Now is the time to stop. Be still and know God. We hold the power. We are the ones that we've been waiting for to create a world that works for everyone. These are powerful times of change and transition from old power structures that clearly do not work for everyone toward new, more equitable ways of being in community with our fellow humans, other animals, plants, indeed the entire planet. We have been living in a nightmare that we have visited upon each other and this planet. And yet, as Brian Stevenson, the lawyer whose real life story is told, part of it anyway, in the movie Just Mercy, he stated in a TED Talk that the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. There is a greater good arising, and our mindful participation in this revelation is necessary. Mindfulness is something we can practice in everything we do. Washing the dishes, folding the laundry, walking in nature. Everywhere we go, we can remind ourselves that we are communing with God in form. As I get still and do my work in consciousness, by turning my attention to what's present and moving within me, within my spirit, mind, and body, I see more and more clearly the ways I have benefited from and participated in this nightmare called white privilege. And I use science of mind to remove the false and replace it with divine truth, with every mindful act. In closing, Reverend Jeff speaks often of kindness and extending kindness, and one act of kindness that we teach in our classes, and I am trained as a practitioner and a minister to do, that readily comes to mind, is listening and sacred witnessing. By providing a safe and sacred space for revelation and exploration of thoughts, beliefs, and ideas, I am extending kindness. I know for myself that I need to be able to express my thoughts and feelings out loud to a sacred witness, a prayer partner, a practitioner, in order to more deeply do my work in consciousness. Listening and working with a practitioner are mindful actions. Participating in book studies, like the one offered by CSL, Me and White Privilege, is another way of demonstrating kindness. Working within our affinity groups. You don't necessarily need to be a licensed practitioner to offer a kind listener's ear to another. So what's mine to do? I am called to be still and know God. I am called to turn fully towards God, the light, the one, and to declare consistently, positively, and aggressively that Black lives matter, and to believe in and work towards a world that works for everyone without harm or detriment to any. Grounded in spirit and standing on the shoulders of those mindful mavericks that have come before me, I take mindful action as only I can. I invite you to do the same. And so it is. Thank you. Thank you for listening. I am grateful. I'd like us to turn to prayer. So I invite you to close your eyes if you're comfortable, turn within. So as I turn within, I am recognizing that there is only one life principle, one divine being. This one is that which I call God, and it is expressing itself in form. It is expressing itself in the form of me and my life. It is expressing itself in the form of the life and experience of every individual on this planet and beyond. For it is never limited. It is vast. The possibilities are endless. And it is good. The arc may be long, but it bends towards justice. And I am so grateful to be alive in this time, doing my work, knowing that there are others doing their work, that we are in this together. We are the ones. We are the one. And so I bless us on this journey. I bless us as we take mindful action. I bless us as we get still and know God. We are God in form. And so I continue this prayer, bringing in the prayers of our community, recognizing this month's nonprofit partner, Nectandra Institute, who through education and research and outreach is promoting conservation of cloud forests and watershed ecosystems in northern Costa Rica. I speak a word for our planet, Mother Earth, gratitude for her beauty and resilience, and our increasingly mindful stewardship of her. I bless all those in service to creating a world that works for everyone. I bless our youth and the youth of the world, knowing that they are guided by the loving mind and heart of spirit. I know love and comfort and healing for those impacted by challenges in whatever form, including Taylor, Reverend Jerry and her brother George, Brady Nobles, and all those impacted by COVID-19 and this nightmare called race and white privilege. Love and comfort for Phyllis and Layla and Volmi Wallace. And I'm knowing peace and comfort for those experiencing transitions of lives, for Katie Adams' sister, Dodie Baker, and her family, for George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Maurice Gordon, and Byron Williams. And I invite you at this time to look within, to acknowledge and recognize if there's someone within your heart that needs a prayer. Speak their name to yourself. Claim the good for them. Use your mindful action to know love. And so I am grateful for this time. I am grateful for this shift in consciousness that is taking place. And grounded in spirit, I simply release my word. I know it's done. I allow it to be. And together in unity, we say, and so it is. Thank you, beloveds.